I went to school at Saxe, and when I was in Standard 8, which is now grade 10, somebody saw that I was collecting postcards of ships and said to me, there's a chap in the hostel who does exactly that. He's got postcards of ships, and why don't you go and talk to him? Which I did, and I found him up in the hostel, and yeah, he had his collection of ships postcards, I had mine. And that's really how I met Sean Day. And I discovered that this chap had been in boarding in the Saxe Junior School since the age of 6, i.e. when he started school, right through until I came across him in what was grade 8. And he matriculated from the same school. So for 12 years he was in boarding and traveling. Initially, I think his father brought him and his brother through to Saxe by car from their home in Knysna. But yeah, Sean and I got on extremely well, and an amazing man. And what would happen is that I was senior to him, so in boys' schools you kind of don't talk to people who are either senior or junior, but we had this common thread of an interest in shipping. And he and I used to do this postcard collecting and also visiting the harbour as often as we could. Now, we never went together that I can recall, but certainly he would recount that he'd ridden on whatever tug. In those days one could ride on the harbour tugs, and I might have done the same thing the following weekend or whatever. But we had a real affinity with each other through this shipping interest. Now, I matriculated in '64, and Sean matriculated from the school 2 years later. And he went to the General Boerter, which is the Merchant Navy Training Academy, which then was situated at Granger Bay, just past the Cape Town waterfront. And he did exceptionally well there. He was cadet captain and things like that, and did really well. I mean, at school he was also quite a brilliant fellow, and participated in everything, sport, academic things, cultural activities and so on. So he was really fully involved in the life of a school. I had done a few things in the interim before he left school. I'd been in the Navy for national service, and I'd also joined SAF Marine on the shore side, and one of my tasks was to place the cadets coming out of the General Boerter onto the SAF Marine ships and just give them a bit of briefing and stuff, and then send them on their way. Now, I got the list of the, I think it was the 1967 intake. Sean was on that list, and we had seen each other a few times during his time at the General Boerter. He was also top of the class in the General Boerter, so I thought, well, the best cadet should get the best ship, which was the newest ship. So I appointed him to a vessel called the S.A. Nederburg, which was on the American trade. And Nederburg was due in Cape Town on the 23rd of December that year. So I phoned him up and I said, Sean, you've got a report here on the 21st or whatever it was of December. We've then got to clear you through medical and uniform and all that, and then you join the ship. And I could hear that he was taken aback. But anyway, he pitched up and he did all these bits and pieces and joined the ship. In a later year, he said to me, he said, you know, I was very resentful to you. And I said, why was that? Because he's not of that. And of course he was good-natured about it. He said, because I was planning on spending Christmas in Knysna, his hometown, with his family, and also having Christmas dinner with his girlfriend of the time. Instead, he was on the S.A. Nederburg off Knysna on Christmas Day. So that was the little joke that we shared all through the rest of our lives. Sean excelled at sea. He did well on the Nederburg, and then he was posted to an older vessel to give different kind of experience and different trade. But sadly, on that ship, the mate was one of these people who believed that cadets had to just be labourers and not trained, and so he and the other cadet were part of the with a few ABs, I suppose, and they hand steered the ship across the Atlantic. And when they weren't hand steering, they were in fact chipping and painting. It was the most useless time of his life, I would think. And a man with such intellect and such vision must have found it extremely boring. And sadly, he left the sea. But in retrospect, his career took a different turn. And then he went to, I think he was called up by the Navy at that stage because he hadn't served 10 years at sea. And in those days, all the white guys had to go to national service. And of course, he was the navigating officer, so that he got called up for the Navy. And after doing a bit of basics in the Navy, he ended up on the destroyer SAS Jan van Riebeeck. And among one of the adventures on van Riebeeck was that he was there when she went to the rescue of the crew from a container ship that had virtually broken off her forepart, and they were not sinking because she was still buoyant, but they had to take off some of the crew while the salvage guys hooked up and towed her, I think, into Durban. After that, he went to university and excelled. Here's a man with a very, very bright mind, visionary mind, a really astute person. So he went right through the thing and did extremely well. But all I know is that Harry Oppenheimer, the South African mining magnate, was I think he was the chancellor of the university at the time. And he met Sean at a function, and Sean happened to remark that he was going to Johannesburg the next day. And Harry Oppenheimer says, well, I'm also going to Johannesburg. Would you like to fly in my plane? And of course, you don't often get an invitation from such a person to accompany them on the plane. And he said, but you must understand that I've got a lot of stuff to read, so I won't be able to have too much of a conversation while we fly. And of course, to Sean, that made perfect sense. But what Sean had heard is that Harry Oppenheimer had a gift of reading quickly. So he was very keen to see how quickly Harry Oppenheimer read a page of a business document. And Sean was sitting in the plane where he could see Harry Oppenheimer. It's one of these small business jets. And Sean was sitting there, and lo and behold, Harry Oppenheimer took out a file and started reading and paging through it. And Sean looked and he thought, well, he's taking a bit long to read that page, but Oppenheimer had fallen asleep. So Sean's gauging of his speed reading wasn't quite there. Sean completed university in Cape Town and then was awarded a Rhodes Scholarship to Oxford. And I think he studied law there. And after that, he went to work for a company in Hong Kong called Jardines, which is a huge, multifaceted shipping outfit with not only ship owning, but ship broking, ships agency, ship insurance and financing and all. So it's a huge company, and Sean worked there for a while. And I know that Sean told a joke against himself where he was obviously regarded as a young Turk coming through the ranks. And he was sent to China with two others, I think they were. A small team went to China. And the brief was that they were to assess for Jardines whether China at that stage, and we're talking probably in the early 1970s, to assess its readiness for containerization. And of course, it was still under the cloud of Mao Zedong and all of his policies and all that. So they went there and they studied this and they studied that, and they looked at the railways and the roads and the bridges and the harbors and all, and came back and said to their bosses, sadly, we doubt whether China will ever be ready for containerization. Well, as we now know, things changed quite a bit, and I think it's of the top 10 container ports in the world, the top 9 are Chinese. He also worked, I understand, in Taiwan for a while, so for this company, and that gave him a huge experience in shipping abroad, which stood him in good stead later on. He visited South Africa occasionally during that time, and that's when we got together again and were able to have the odd chat. But it was more sort of a family visit than anything else. And then he went to work in North America, and his time in North America was in dry bulk shipping and also in banking, because he realized that one of the fundamental issues of ship owning is that you need to know something about the financing of shipping. So he was very keen to learn about that, and he worked for, I think it was Citibank in New York, with access to their maritime portfolio. And through that he ended up with a company called FedNav, which is a big bulk shipping company, shipping grain out of the Great Lakes. So again, he gained huge experience there. And while he was there, he was approached by TK Tanker Corporation, which is a huge tanker company, mostly with what are called Aframax tankers, which is a type of tanker up to about 100,000 tons deadweight, and also Suezmax tankers, which are the largest tankers that can get through the Suez Canal fully laden. And they did have, I think, 1 or 2 VLCCs, which are the largest type of tankers. And the other thing that they got into was gas and the transportation of gas, and a few other aspects of shipping. And Sean was invited to join the board of TK Tanker Corporation by the brother of the owner. The brother's name was Axel Karlshoy, a wonderful man who himself was a very, very successful businessman, starting from scratch in North America as a Danish immigrant. And TK Tanker Company was also started by Torben Karlshoy, and his initials are obviously TK, and that's where the name comes from. And Torben himself also started as a little Danish farm boy who found his way to North America and succeeded in the tanker world. After a couple of setbacks, I might add, but this huge tanker company evolved from the work of Torben Karlshoy. He passed away, but his brother took over the running of the company as chairman. And there was also a wonderful man called Bjorn Moller, who was the CEO. And Bjorn, an exceptionally keen mind, a man of great intellect, but also a man who was very down to earth and a human being. He was wonderful, as was Axel. And I remember that I went to TK office in Vancouver, and Bjorn picked me up. He'd just retired. He picked me up, taken me to his home for lunch, and he wished me happy wedding anniversary. And how he knew that, I still don't know to this day. But that was Bjorn Muller, a very people-centered man and an outstanding shipping brain. Anyway, those were the sort of people who were running TK, and Sean was invited to the board and eventually was elected chairman. And under his guidance and working closely with people like Bjorn Muller and others, they built up TK to be, I think it was the world's largest operator of those classes of tanker. And they were immensely proud of the achievement that they had done, and rightly so, because this was working extremely hard, growing the company by acquiring others and buying additional ships. So there was this team of Sean and the board and Bjorn Muller as the chief executive and other very dynamic executive managers in other divisions of the company. So it was probably a very happy company to be a part of, and it was certainly a dynamic company, and their results show that. They had at one stage, just to backtrack, when Sean was in the grain business, word came to him that there was a chap running a company that one of his business associates said that they should become involved with. And Sean said, well, who's this chap? Well, he lives in the Bahamas and he lives on a boat and he manages his company from there. And Sean said, well, we don't do business with people like that. And that was Torben Karlsøy, and the company he was running was in fact TK Tankers. And Sean also told that story sort of a little bit against himself, but it shows how human Sean was. TK didn't trade regularly to South Africa at all, so really Sean had no business interest in South Africa. But he was here on one occasion to visit some schools where he personally had made a major contribution to the lives of young people by making available several bursaries in many parts of South Africa. And so he would come out every so often to see how all that was going and so on. And one particular time he came out to do that, and I said to him, well, Sean, you must come and talk to the kids at Lawhill. Now, at that stage, we didn't have a smart building. We had, in fact, a container hostel. And it was wonderful. I mean, for 11 years, that was home from home for X number of kids. And it served the purpose. But those containers, when they came, had seen many years at sea. And so some of them were starting to show their age and be a bit leaky and so on. And we also had a major fire, which was an electrical short circuit. So there was time for a little bit of improvement somewhere along the line. And Sean came and I said, you must speak to the kid, Sean, because he's a living example of a South African who's done exceptionally well in the international world. Anyway, Sean came and he talked and all that, and it was wonderful, and he had a lovely time, I think, and we certainly enjoyed having him, and his rapport with the young people was just amazing, how he related to them. A few months later, we corresponded regularly by email. I must just add that at one point we lost contact, and Lawhill had just started at that point when contact was resumed, and the way it was resumed is that Lawhill had won an award in London with the Maritime newspaper called Lloyd's List. And we were very proud of that, and Lloyd's List published an article about it, and they stuck my email address on it. And the next day there was an email from somebody called S. Day, and it was Sean, and he just said, are you the same guy? He made available some personal funding for costs of Lawhill. And then one day there came an email, and just sort of in the usual thing about how his family was doing and bit of world politics and shipping stuff, there was just a little paragraph that said something like this, by the way, you know, he visited Lawhill. What is your dream for Lawhill? Now, when somebody says that, you're not sure what sort of answer he's looking for. So I started off by saying, well, Sean, we'd like some more big photographs for the walls of the building. We'd like a few new this and a new that. And just by way of a joke, I put at the bottom, and of course a new Maritime Centre would be really nice as a throwaway line. And Sean went quiet for literally 3 or 4 weeks after that, and I thought, oh, I said the wrong thing. That was about March of 2007. But round about September, an email came from him saying, I'm coming to South Africa in October, and I'm bringing with me Susie Karlsøy, who is the daughter of the founder of TK. And she is the leading light in the TK Foundation, which assists with the financing of projects and so on, which are largely to do with education and so on. Oh, okay. And have an architect on standby. So I went back to him and said, well, it'd be nice to see you, Sean, but what's the architect for? Your new Maritime Centre. And that was the start of the new building. And when Sean came, I had got an architect available, and Susie was with us as well, so we met her, a wonderful lady, absolutely wonderful lady. And we discussed this whole question of, okay, now what about this new centre? The architect went away having listened to what we wanted, and we met with him several times, and he came up with a design which is the design of the building that's there now. And TK Foundation footed that bill. Everything, and I mean everything. It's one of the most generous things I've ever experienced. It is the most generous thing I've ever experienced, where a company not trading to South Africa, not wanting political brownie points with anybody, but was prepared to help a project that they felt they could associate with. And here they were putting in that sort of money to build a centre with classrooms, with recreation facilities, with accommodation for, I think it was 66 young people, staff accommodation, and also a lovely dining room with galley and so on. And later on, that same TK Foundation came up with the cash when we needed to expand to accommodate more young people, and also to accommodate electronic navigation teaching, and a new subject called marine science, which is a combination of oceanography and marine biology. Lawhill then was able to offer, firstly, more space for more young people, but also it was, besides the maritime economics and the nautical science, which had classrooms, and where the teaching was happening and the courses were running, we were also able to add marine science. And so the young people there have got 3 legs on which they can build a career. And marine science is a most interesting subject. It's a well-rounded course that they do. It would never have been possible had it not been for Sean's intervention in that program. And in addition to that, he sent me an email one day, and he said that he would like to support young people. And he made available a sum of money that would earn interest, that could then provide annual bursaries for kids who needed it. And that was, I think, symbolic of the generous man that he was. Absolutely outstanding person. A man of great principle. Absolutely great principle. I was mentioning also earlier the bit about the tanker Nordic Lorita that was carrying oil on contract from the oil field off southwest of Mossel Bay to Cape Town for refining in the Cape Town oil refinery. And there were times when she was anchored for several weeks outside Cape Town. Now, Sean arrived on one of his visits, and he said he's going to visit the tanker. Now, she's out in the bay at anchor, and he invited me to go with him. And so we went out in a launch, and it was great fun, because I used to do that often when I was with SAF Marine. And we climbed up the ladder at the side, and she's a tanker in ballast, so the freeboard was quite enormous. And up we went, and he gets on board, and I think it was a Spanish crew on board. And he met the master, and the master took us around and showed us the ship, immaculate condition, as all TK tankers are. And one of the things that Sean asked him was, Captain, how long is it since you people have been in a port to have shore leave? And I can't remember the answer, but it was about 3 or 4 weeks. In that they had been to the field, took a long time to load, came back, had to sit outside Cape Town before they went in to discharge, and so on. So they'd had a long time before the crew could actually get ashore. And Sean pulled out a little notebook from his pocket, and he wrote a little note and put the notebook back. And the next day when I drove past the harbour, Nordic Lorita was alongside. And I said to him, Sean, I bet you had something to do with her coming in. So I said, oh, you've got to look after these people. And that was his attitude, that the crew were the guys who were earning the money in the company, and they have to be looked after. He said, you can't expect people to be out in the blue earning your money and not look after them. And that's, in fact, was one of the hallmarks of his career, looking after people. He knew that one of my little hobbies was writing, and I'd written a couple of company histories here in South Africa and a few other books, and maritime related books. And one day he said, would you like to write the TK history, because the 40-year anniversary was coming up. And I jumped at the opportunity because this was a tanker company. I hadn't done much with tankers before. And he said, okay. And then he organized that I should visit New York, well, I should visit him at home, which I did. I had about 4 or 5 days with him and Ginny and one of their daughters. And it was just a most refreshing time. Sean was the sort of man who kept fit, unlike me, and he would go out jogging. I remember the one morning there was snow on the ground, and out he went jogging, and came back. He made his porridge, and he sat and ate it out of the jug that he'd made it in at the kitchen table, and we chatted. It was just such a homely kind of place to be. They're wonderful parents. They've got 4 beautiful and lovely daughters, all successful in every way. Alexa, I think she's the second eldest daughter, was bringing her boyfriend to visit Mom and Dad. And I think this was the first time that they'd met, because Alexa was in San Francisco and here we were right on the other side of the country. And I said, well, I'll make myself scarce because it was a family occasion. No, you're part of the family. Okay. So I stayed for the supper. It was a very interesting conversation with the young man as well. But a very pleasant guy and you know, just obviously right. And when the time came for the dessert, Ginny, Sean's wife, and Alexa went through to the kitchen, and they came out with a birthday cake with candles. It was my birthday. And it was just one of those moments in life where, wow, somebody's remembered this guy's miles away from home on his birthday, and there we are. And obviously Sean and Ginny had worked that one out somehow, and it was a lovely touch. But I travelled across to San Francisco and to meet up again with Susie Karlshoy, to Palm Springs to meet people down there who were associates of Torben, and also to visit the house where he died. He passed away one night during a golfing holiday at Palm Springs in a house on the golf course, very unexpectedly. But and that was very sad. But anyway, I wrote the book, and then I also I went to see where Torben grew up, on a farm in Denmark. So I visited Denmark for the first time, and part of that trip was also to go to Norway, where TK were heavily involved in the oil industry out of Stavanger. So it was just one of those wonderful, wonderful experiences, all made possible for me by Sean. And it was just an exciting opportunity for me, and I hope I did them well with the book. But then came another email, I think it was 2017, and it said something like this: Brian, we're going to be naming the new tanker, it was a gas tanker, being built in Korea, and we're going to call it the Torben Spirit. All the TK tankers have got the word Spirit at the end. And this was being named after the founder, the second tanker to bear that name. The other one had been taken out of service before. Would you and Margaret, my wife, like to attend the naming ceremony in Korea? Wow, I mean, again, it was just this generous spirit of Sean. And they flew us from Cape Town via Dubai, via Beijing to Busan in Korea. We attended the naming ceremony. We had a tour of the shipyard. It was absolutely wonderful. And apart from it, the fact that I was privileged to go. It was a huge learning experience for me because I was able to see a huge shipyard. I'd seen small shipyards. There was a small one in Cape Town. There were others in Durban that I had visited, but never on the scale of this, where they were building vessels 300 to 400 meters long, carrying thousands and thousands and thousands of tons of cargo. There were drill ships, there were oil rigs, there were all sorts of ships being built in this yard. And it was just one of those experiences. And because of that, it enriched my teaching, because I was able to show kids the pictures I had taken, able to tell them this is that and that's the other, just to see the scale of the shipbuilding. It was such an eye-opener, but it was a huge privilege for us to be part of that very personal naming ceremony, because Torben's daughter, he died while his wife was pregnant with this girl. She was born after his death, so his daughter had never known him, but she named the ship after her father, and that was extremely moving. The rest of the family were there. Susie, her sister and so on were there as well. It was such a moving experience. I said to Sean in the exchange before we went to Korea, that Sean, it'd be nice to see you again in Korea. He says, no, he's not going. And I thought, oh, okay. He's got a medical issue, and you don't like to ask somebody a question, okay, what's wrong? And eventually it came out that he had this very debilitating disease, and that was a huge blow, because to all of us, apart from him and the family, here was a man who was about to retire, I would think, who would have been able to offer so much of his knowledge and experience and just his personal philosophy to so many people, and yet he was going to be severely handicapped by this disease. And then obviously it got worse, and one time he said, I can only type with my thumb now. And then a few months later he said that there was a sort of a greater delay between emails, and he said, sorry it's so late, the response is so late, but he had to wait for somebody to come and do his typing for him on the computer. But you know, he, in the emails to me, he never once complained. He spoke of his blessing of having a wonderful wife, wonderful family, wonderful friends, caring for him, etc., etc. Always on the bright side. Although he must have been going through an awful experience, because I couldn't imagine his active mind being imprisoned the way it would have been within his body, being so crippled. And very sad indeed, and of course tragic for him and the family. Even when he was ill, I would say to him, Sean, you know, a person who prays, and I'm praying for you. And he'd say, yes, and I'm praying for you in your work. Here was a guy in dire straits, and yet he had time to say that to me. And I'm just moved by it, because that's who he was. That was Sean, a wonderful friend. It was a great loss, when we heard of the illness and as it progressed. And then also when Annie sent me an email to say that he'd passed away. So a huge loss to everybody, and of course to the family, who lost a wonderful, wonderful husband, wonderful father and grandfather and father-in-law. His memory lives on. The company named the tanker after him, the Sean Spirit. And we at Lawhill, we were donated a big, rigid, inflatable boat for training the kids. We named ours Sean Day. So from the big tanker, gas tanker, to this rather small boat, his name does live on, as it does in the Sean Day scholarships, as a person who exhorted younger people to do their best, and who made it possible for many to come out of abject poverty, and I mean that, abject poverty, to attend a place like Lawhill or some of the other schools where he made these bursaries available, believing in a policy of a hand up, not a hand out. We remember him with affection, with huge respect, and with great love, and we share the grief of the family at the loss of what must have been a truly wonderful father and husband.